Cecily Aguilar pleads guilty in connection with the death of Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Guillen. Let's get into the details. My name is Jamahl C, and I'm the principal attorney at Kersey Law, a boutique criminal defense firm in San Diego, California. And in this video, we're talking about the criminal case in which Vanessa Guillen was murdered. Now, Vanessa Guillen is the soldier who had gone missing a couple of years ago, and she's the subject of the Netflix special, I Am Vanessa Guillen. So to kind of go through the players involved here, Aaron David Robinson is the man who was accused of killing Vanessa Guillen, and Cecily Aguilar was Robinson's girlfriend. Now, last week, Cecily Aguilar pled guilty to 1 count of accessory to murder after the fact and 3 counts of making a false statement. Cecily Aguilar is facing up to 30 years in prison and a fine of up to $1 million. And let me know in the comment section below, how much time do you think she deserves for her involvement in this, and how much time do you think she'll actually get if those two numbers are different? So for a little bit of background, Vanessa Guillen had the lifelong dream of joining the Army, and she actually was able to fulfill that dream. And even more special, she was stationed at Fort Hood, which was in her home state of Texas, and she worked in the armory as a weapons repairer. Now, Vanessa Guillen had gone missing in April of 2020. So her family and her fiance, they had been trying to reach out to her, sending her text messages, giving her phone calls, and she just wasn't responsive. So at some point, her family reaches out to Army officials to try and find out, where's Vanessa? What's going on? Unfortunately, they just were not very helpful at all. And so, the resiliency of family just refusing to give up, they end up taking to social media. The story blows up. It ends up on the news, and then that leads to protests. But unfortunately, Vanessa Guillen's body was ultimately found in a shallow grave on June 30th, 2020, just a couple of months after her, going missing. When her remains were found, it was discovered that the way she died was being hit in the back of the head with a hammer. And what just a horrendous way to die. And this murder actually took place on the Army base at Fort Hood, and then her body was transferred to the shallow grave where, she was discovered. Authorities came to believe that Aaron David Robinson, who also was in the Army, had killed Guillen, and that Robinson's girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, was accused basically of helping him cover it up. Now, this case had prompted major outrage because on 2 separate occasions, Guillen had reported that Robinson had sexually assaulted her, and basically nothing at all had become of these complaints. And, we'll never know, but if the Army had done what it should have done in properly addressing these complaints, perhaps Vanessa Guillen would still be alive today. She was only 20 years old when she died, and, obviously had her whole life and career ahead of her. But unfortunately, that life was cut short. And so the Army base at Fort Hood was, already notorious for incidents of sexual assault and misbehavior that had basically been swept under the rug. And so naturally, in the military, there is a culture of following orders. But obviously, something like that can become problematic when the very higher ups who are supposed to be followed are the ones committing such atrocities. This culture, at least at Fort Hood, is, basically what allowed this tragic incident to occur, because people were following orders, or, even when the people who committed these acts were clearly in the wrong. And so specifically in this case, Aaron Robinson had been basically the last person to see Guillen. And when he was questioned, he said that he had met up with her regarding something work-related, and then, they had gone their separate ways. But Cecily Aguilar, the girlfriend, eventually, contradicted this statement, basically informing investigators that Robinson had in fact murdered Guillen at the base, and then she helped him get rid of the body. And so when you think about it, Cecily Aguilar was active in the process of cutting Guillen into pieces, burning her body, and burying her in this shallow grave. And so The timeline of events that were going on is, at some point, Miss Aguilar gives this statement to the authorities, and Robinson at some point was being held for having broken COVID protocols. And so you have to think that this ended up happening in, late June, early July of 2020. So we're at the very beginning stages of COVID. Fear is rampant. So basically there were these COVID protocols in place, and Robinson had broken them. And so he was being held as a result of this. And so the person who was tasked with watching over him apparently had not been informed that Robinson was, or became the prime suspect in this murder investigation. And so Robinson still had access to his phone. It's not like, he was in jail at this point, but, he had access to his phone, and Aguilar, ends up texting him these news articles about Vanessa Guillen's body having been found. And so, naturally Robinson would have thought, oh man, well now they're going to be on to me. They're going to catch me and I'm going to get arrested and prosecuted for murder. Robinson manages to get out from where he's being held. That's when he ends up trying to leave the army base. The police actually catch up with him. And in a final act of cowardice, Robinson shoots himself, committing suicide. And so there, his girlfriend, Aguilar is basically left holding the bag. She ends up getting arrested and charged for her involvement in this murder. She gave a statement saying that Robinson murdered Vanessa Guillen and that she helped with, the cover up of this crime. And so, before a lawyer gets involved, because generally speaking, most criminal defense attorneys are going to say, do not give any statements to any law enforcement without a lawyer present or after a lawyer advising you to do so. And so, sometimes the lawyer doesn't come into the case until after the fact, after the person's already been charged. And that's what appears to have happened here. And so once the lawyers get involved, Aguilar basically tries to walk back her confessions. She basically said, no, what happened was that Aaron Robinson, my boyfriend, basically held me at gunpoint and forced me to help him do away with Guillen's body. So in other words, if he had not held her at gunpoint, then, she wouldn't have done this and she'd have never had anything to do with this. But out of fear for her life, fear for her safety, she helped out. This approach didn't really go very far. And so her attorneys actually ended up, doing other things to try and get rid of this confession. Her defense attorneys basically argued that the vehicle that she was a passenger in was illegally pulled over and detained without a warrant. And then, on the Miranda side, that she was not read her Miranda rights before giving a statement. But the prosecutors ultimately argued that the vehicle that she was in, it was pulled over because the law enforcement officers were aware that she was barred from being at this particular post. And ultimately, if the stop was valid, then, there's not a Fourth Amendment violation. And so in terms of the Miranda violation, the issue was that, when you're asserting a Miranda violation, you're basically saying that you gave a statement or you made a confession, but the police violated your rights by not reading you your Miranda rights, essentially that you have the right to remain silent and anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. But the issue is, in order for you to have a right to have law enforcement read you the Miranda rights, you have to be subjected to a custodial interrogation. Now, in custody, obviously, if you're in police custody at a jail, that's obvious, but it doesn't have to be, that you're actually in jail. You could be in a park bench and be considered to be in custody if a reasonable person would not feel like they're free to leave in that situation. Then that would be considered a custodial interrogation, and therefore you would need, or the police would need to read your Miranda rights before interrogating you. If Aguilar were successful on either one of these motions, then it just really would have been helpful, because there may not have been much left to tie her to this crime. I mean, obviously, Robinson had killed himself. He wasn't going to say anything about her. And Miss Guillen obviously was murdered, so she wasn't going to say anything. So there may not have been anything else that would have tied her to this case. But ultimately, her legal challenges to the evidence were unsuccessful. And so, with there being basically a confession there, going to trial on a case where you confess to having done away with this body, there just really would have been no point in trying to go to trial. And so that's why the case settled and she ended up pleading guilty. And so now she's facing 30 years in prison. And, as far as I know, she didn't have any particular criminal history. And so when you're looking at, how much time a person is going to get, obviously it's much better for a person to have no criminal history versus, just a long string of criminal offenses on your rap sheet. But when it comes to a first-time offender, sometimes your first offense is just so horrendous and so shocks the conscious that you still could be, facing a lot of time. And that's essentially the case here. You admitted to having cut up a body. So the body of a woman who was murdered, you cut up this body, you burned it, you buried it, covering up a murder. And Vanessa Guillen had been missing for months. And if nobody had found the body, then presumably Robinson and Aguilar would have just gone on with their lives as if nothing had ever happened. And that is absolutely disgusting. And for that reason, I believe that this judge is going to hammer Aguilar. I could see something in the range of 18 to 20 years. I think going single digits is just not going to be enough. It's not going to be considered adequate punishment to fit this particular crime. Even low teens seems like it would be low for this case. Again, with what she did after this murder having taken place, I really think, something in the 18, 20 year range is probably where she will land. Again, let me know in the comments below how much time you think she'll get. My sincerest hope is that this story continues to spark change, and ideally something like this, just never happens again. And may Miss Guillen's memory continue to live on. Thoughts and prayers to her family, her fiance, her friends, her loved ones. And that's going to be the end of this video. So if you got something out of this, please show me some love and hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.